where do the Dallas Cowboys go from here?
I'm not selling hope to the Dallas Cowboys. That's not good news for you. And the worst part of this entire equation is that the worst is yet to come. And what do I mean by that? The worst is yet to come because next year, 45% of their entire salary cap is being locked up between two players, Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb. And it's unprecedented to have $89 million allocated to one player, Dak Prescott. This is not negative Dak Prescott. That is Jerry Jones's fault.
Yeah, for sure,
And
100%.
at the end of the day, he signed the contract. He made the deals. You are not going to put a winning roster together because 45% of your cap is locked up between two guys. And you can't, that puts you in a really bad spot moving forward.
The U.S. government, we have checks and balances at the end of the day. And the
Ah,
Dallas Cowboys don't have checks and
no, they
balances.
don't.
I watched Jerry Jones get up there every single interview and say, hey, I think this team is good enough.
Mm.
Of course you do, because you're the one that built this team, right?
Correct.
So who is the one that's going to go against him and say, the offensive line is not good enough? The defensive line is not good enough.
Yep.
We've had a linebacker problem for 5 years, and we refuse to address the linebacker situation, right?
Mhm.
Trayvon Diggs is coming off of an ACL injury to a cornerback,
Yeah.
a cornerback where you cut at high speeds and you say, you know what, we're going to just throw him out there and we're not going to try to put somebody on the other side. Deron Bland was hurt. The safety position has been average for another 5
Is
years.
that
Like,
it?
if you really look at this roster, and that's the problem, is that Jerry Jones protects himself by sitting up there and selling something, selling that the Cowboys are actually a good team. And the truth is,
They're not.
Dak Prescott been saving the Dallas Cowboys. I said it this offseason. If I was Dak Prescott, I would have packed my bags and said, you know what? Don't even worry about paying me. Send me to Minnesota. Send me to Atlanta. I'll go somewhere where they truly value me. And those who want Cooper Rush, go ahead and take Cooper Rush.
The problem with that is for Dak, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you stand up in front of the mic and you say, it's important for me to set the market, right? And all those things. Listen, I get it. But there's a certain, when you are paid as the number one quarterback, there's a certain level of expectation that comes along with that. And I'm not saying that I don't agree with you, but Dak has also not been very good.
Oh,
That's
last year,
fair.
but I would say it's been inconsistent.
Yeah.
The quarterbacks are representative of their surrounding
For
pieces
sure.
at the end of the day. We
Yep.
have to remember, it was just 5 years ago in New England where people were saying Tom Brady was done.
Mhm.
Tom Brady left and won a Super Bowl the very next year.
Correct.
Less than a year later, he was hosting
100%.
Lombardi.
But
So,
you're talking about the GOAT.
yeah, and that's my point. If we're talking about the greatest of all time is affected by the surrounding pieces, why wouldn't Dak Prescott be affected by the surrounding pieces? And you trade Amari Cooper, right? Because there's some emotional situation with them. And
Yeah.
guess what? Now he's with the Buffalo Bills. And Josh Allen is probably really happy to have Amari Cooper
Yeah, I bet
this,
so.
at this moment. I just look at it and I say, where's the hope for the Dallas Cowboys?
It's Jerry Jones relinquishing control of the team. Because until that happens, I'm going to be totally honest.
Mhm.
When you have an ownership problem, there's nothing you can really do about it.
Right.
And Jerry's the biggest, baddest, loudest, most controlling, most power owner that there is. And with that comes a lot of baggage. The problem for Cowboys fans and for him is because they won in the 90s, he thinks he can do it like he did then. And it's not the same game anymore.
Why the salary cap?
When you go in and you give your quarterback $89 million, they've been acting like the salary cap ain't real for a long time.
So,
And it's real. It's very real. Ask the New Orleans Saints. They are in a terrible situation because Sean Payton and Mickey Loomis pushed this off, and now Dennis Allen is having to deal with the decisions that happened before he was the head coach. He gets fired for that. They're not winning football games, and this is a business about winning and losing. But he inherited a lot of these issues that were not decisions he made, in the same way that whatever coach comes in for the Cowboys, they're going to inherit this BS. And they inherit Jerry Jones. They don't act like the salary cap is real. The other big issue here is they don't have an identity, Keith. Every football team needs an identity. What is your core identity? Are you a path? And they don't have that. And the
Right.
best version of them was when they had a great offensive line, they ran the ball, and Dak played well. And if that's the case, you can't go then pay Amari Cooper after you already paid Ezekiel Elliott. He just hands out $100 million contracts like they're going out of style. And he don't know what the hell he doing.
Yeah.
He doesn't. That's the problem. And if you are giving $100 million to number one wide receiver, then why are you also giving $100 million to Ezekiel Elliott? Are you a run team first or are you a pass happy team? Nobody knows, and your team doesn't know.
And
That's your problem.
if you look at it, when the Cowboys went on that run in the 90s,
Yes.
it's because they had the triplets, right? They had the wide receiver, the
Yeah.
running back, and the quarterback. And when you had success a certain way, that's what they were trying to get back. But I think it screwed them also, right? They were
Doesn't
trying to
work like
get the
that.
triplets again, right? Trying to have a wide receiver, a running back, and a quarterback. And I'm with you. It doesn't work like that. And I look at it because I think Dak is going to take a lot of heat for being an $89 million guy. I think next year against the cap. I would say this, though, from whatever, let's flip it on his other side, right? And if we were being totally selfish, or we just solely put ourselves in Dak Prescott's shoes, right? How confident are you in the front office that if I take a pay cut, because that's what the conversation is going to be, well, take a pay cut so they could surround you with a better team. If I watch you get rid of Amari Cooper, if I watch you make bad roster decisions, how confident am I in you in the front office to draft good football players that when I take a pay cut, it's going to result in wins? And that's the thing that we have to look at it from the other side. And that's what I would say with the Dallas Cowboys is that way bigger than Dak Prescott, because Dak Prescott, I think he's a team player. I think he
Yeah, I
gives his
agree.
all to playing quarterback. But this team has a culture problem. At
Correct.
the end of the day, whenever you have two teammates and they hop on a podcast and
Yeah.
they do not put that quarterback, Dak Prescott, in the top 10, and we're sitting here, right? We're having a conversation. How easy is it just to simply say, Paige Dimakos, hey, I'm going to take Paige Dimakos out of this list, right? Because
It's
who's he?
very easy.
Top 10 co-host, and I say, don't list Paige
Yeah,
Dimakos' name.
I put my host to the side. Every player that's ever been asked that question, they do that at the beginning.
No.
Okay, put my guy to the side, or the co-host does it for them, right? That tells you a lot about where this team is structurally.
Selfish.
You've got a lot of individuals playing for themselves, and you don't have a cohesive unit playing as a team. And in football, more than any sport, it is about the team. And you have to have all 11 on each play playing together. And if one guy is playing for himself, it shows. And you got a lot of dudes. I can identify the moments this season where CeeDee Lamb is playing for himself.
Mhm.
And it shows. And that's not good. When you got guys that are not bought into what you're doing, what you're selling, it's not working. It has been a disaster after disaster with this team this year. And you have to blame Jerry. And Jerry ain't going to take accountability. He's not going to stand up and say, it's my fault. He's not going to. Like, we are way past that point. If Dak wants to try to come in and be about winning with the Dallas Cowboys, use your power. Come in and say, okay, you guys want to renegotiate my contract? Here are the next 3 moves that you're going to do then. I want this, and I want this head coach. Show your power. Flex your muscle then. Do it.
So
That's the only logical thing that can be done, because they're not winning with him on that deal, with them currently trying to figure out what type of situation this is, because it's a disaster in Dallas.
yeah, it's finally hit its breaking point, and they've won. They were a regular season team, right, the past few years, and when it got down to the trenches and it really being about football and the run game and
Yeah.
things like that, I think they're finally at the point now where that can't help them anymore. They just are who they are, and nobody's buying into just Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb carrying them to the promised land.
No.
It's just not there no more. And just with quarterbacks, right? Let's spice this up. Right? We're going to talk about some young quarterbacks. We're going to talk about.
Hang on. Before we
Okay,
get in
go
there,
ahead.
I got
Go
one
ahead,
that I
let's
got to say. About a year ago, I floated an idea
Okay.
that much closer to reality. To get to that point, the Dallas Cowboys would have to be a very bad team. We are there. They are in a position where for the next foreseeable future, Dak Prescott will not be starting, so they are going to be worse than they have been. It's not looking great if they end up with a top 5 pick. They have a quarterback that's on a very expensive deal. Very expensive, but there's a lot of people that would like Dak Prescott. Okay?
100%.
So how can you trade away Dak Prescott, have to eat some of his money, because you would, because nobody's taking that deal as is. You draft a rookie quarterback. Okay, so you draft, I don't know, QB1 Shador Sanders, who happens to be Deion Sanders' son, who played for the Cowboys. And they need a new head coach. He makes Deion Sanders the head coach of the Cowboys with Shador, and it becomes the biggest show on earth that there has ever been or we've ever seen. And the Colorado shit is so insignificant as far as how much you've seen branding-wise, and you think Jerry doesn't pay attention to that? You don't think he saw the college football ratings and all that stuff happen in Colorado? This man loves a show. He lives for a show. And what can you tell your fans? What can you tell? How do you get your fans to come back to you after this? Guess what? I'm bringing Deion home. I'm making Shador the oh, I can just hear him talking about it already. I can.
So
I can hear him talking about it, and it's not that far of a stretch anymore, mostly because they're a bad team and they're going to end up with the top pick.
no, that conspiracy theory, first of all, right? Like you said, it's taking a turn to where
To be
it,
more than a conspiracy.
you're talking about where Colorado has placed themselves, and we know that winning changes the light for everything, right? Because Colorado wins the Big 12. They go to the playoff. And it's from Deion as this guy that rubs people the wrong way to he's a guy that knows how to run a football program.
Mhm.
And if he turned around Colorado, who was 1-11 and has been bad for the past 10 years, could he be the guy for the Dallas
I'm just
Cowboys? And
saying.
what guy knows winning and the culture of the Dallas Cowboys like Deion Sanders being there? With that being said, I think that is too much for even the NFL and Jerry Jones to
All
take.
right.
Could you
All
talk
right.
about just an explosive collaboration that would be
I
off the
want it to
rails?
happen so bad. I need Deion Sanders in Dallas.
Because you invite smoke. You want all the smoke. You want
Deion in
all the
Dallas. I can see it.
all the big time
I
energy.
need it.
I like it. I like it. Look, we just had probably one of the more explosive conversations, right?
Mhm.
Surrounding a rookie quarterback. And I think it prompted to have some conversations around two rookie quarterbacks. Bryce
Yeah.
Young is just coming off of his second win with the Carolina Panthers. Anthony Richardson
Mm.
was benched for Joe Flacco. Both quarterbacks drafted in the same year, both benched for veterans. Both quarterbacks, it appears, are in situations where the owner, the general manager, and the head coach are not on the same page with how they entered the season and what were the goals for the season. I want to talk about just the handling of young quarterbacks and what should be the actual process of getting these guys to be good college quarterbacks, to get into the NFL, productive NFL quarterbacks, because we have a development problem in
Yeah,
the NFL.
for sure. We have a big time development problem
Yeah.
in the NFL, and that is that we have a ton of quarterbacks coming in younger and more inexperienced than ever before. We've seen that with the opposite side when you have a guy like Brock Purdy, who they will mention ad nauseum, had a lot of starts and a lot of experience. That's the opposite end of this spectrum. You have guys coming in who need to be developed. And we knew this. We knew Anthony Richardson needed to be developed. He was as raw of a quarterback prospect as could possibly be. The Indianapolis Colts said, no, he's a development project. He's a guy that we need to work on and develop. And then they started him week 1. So which one is it? Is he a raw prospect that needs to be developed? Or is he a surefire, ready-made quarterback ready to start?
Right.
Because one does not equal the other. And that's the problem. The Panthers, that's a bad situation from top to bottom. And it's been a bad situation since the new owner, Dave Tepper, got there. Whether it's the Matt Rule stuff that happened in the 7-year article and all that stuff that got sent out, the drafting only defensive players, then the total flip of the switch and changing direction. Culturally, another team that has not figured it out at all. And this is a huge problem. It's a huge problem because I don't have a lot of faith in the Panthers, even though I have a lot of faith in Bryce Young.
Right.
The Richardson stuff, I guess if we start there first.
Let's do that one.
The messaging doesn't add up. It's a developmental quarterback, and you start him week 1. You can't put the cat back in the bag after you let it out.
No,
right?
you can't.
And everybody saw it. And so now what do you do? What do you do moving forward? How do you save Anthony Richardson and
The truth, I don't think there is much saving to be done, right? I think the damage has been done. And it's not only just to his mental, but the damage has been done to the fans' mental. When I look at this Anthony Richardson situation, the problem for me, right, is that I spend a lot of time watching film.
Mhm.
I evaluate these guys. I had a second round grade on Anthony Richardson coming out of the University of Florida, right? Because while there were so many highlights, there were the things that he needed to develop. And was he a big ball of clay that if you got the right situation, which was the Indianapolis Colts,
Yeah.
you can mold him into something? But
Sure.
there was also the other side of that you had to expect the lows and you
Yeah.
had to grow with him. There was a certain thing, there was a term. It was going to be growing pains with Anthony Richardson. If you watched the film, you knew that. What happened with ownership was they started buying into the hype.
They got excited.
They started reading the news
Yeah.
clippings, right? They got on social media and said, you know what? We can go with this guy right away. So I think the messaging was one, hey, we're going to take off with Anthony Richardson because he's 6'4", 240 pounds and runs a 4.4, when actually should have been, hey, we're going to draft this guy, develop him. We trust Shane Steichen. And maybe in a year or two, he'll be in a really good spot and we'll have a really good quarterback.
Yeah, and I think it's a message for all and a warning for all these NFL franchises is if you have a plan when you go in, you got to stick to the
Yeah.
and you can't get excited. And you can't let the noise from the fan bases get to you. And you can't go, oh, okay, now he's ready to rock. No, the film is the film and the tape was the tape. And everybody knew that he needed that time. And then Jim Irsay and company, the ownership, got excited because he ran a fast 40 inside the building that they play in and all this stuff at the combine. And then the fans got excited. Guess what? The fans only got excited because you allowed them to get excited.
Hmm.
You just got to shut that stuff down and you got to steer the narrative in a different direction. Because guess what? Andy Reid did it. Patrick Mahomes. Jordan Love sat for multiple.
I was
Terry
doing it.
Fontenot with
Yep.
Michael Penix. Like all that smoke that they got from that Michael Penix. Have you heard anything about it
Nope, they
recently?
don't care.
Nobody cares.
Because they committed to a process. There's expectations and there's realistic expectations, right? And from the situations I've been when I was at LSU, right? You know what type of team you have, right?
Yes.
This is a national championship caliber team. This is a team where, hey, we just trying to win 8, 9 games, right? Like
100%.
and you can't tell me that people inside of those franchises, whether it's the Indianapolis Colts or the Carolina Panthers, they walked in that building and they said, you know what? It's Super Bowl or bust for us.
Yeah.
The reason I push it to that threshold is because the one thing you should have walked away from this year knowing is if Bryce Young can be the starting quarterback for the Carolina Panthers, and if Anthony Richardson can be the starting quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts, right now you can't figure that out because you've ruined both of those guys.
Yeah,
That was your
sure.
one goal.
Yep.
Nobody believed that the Indianapolis Colts or the Carolina Panthers were Super Bowl contenders.
No, and I think the difference between the situations between Indianapolis and Carolina are the rosters completely different. The roster in Indianapolis allowed you to start a veteran quarterback, to win enough games that the fans could be pacified, and to develop a quarterback behind them. That is very hard to get yourself in that position. The Colts were right there. The Carolina Panthers, they weren't in that spot.
No.
It was a tougher situation. They shouldn't have done the trade to move up because they weren't ready for it. They were in the wrong spot, but they did what they did. Then they went to Bryce, and instead of keeping him playing, they go to Andy Dalton for what?
Right.
For what? What did we learn from Andy Dalton? Nothing.
Nothing at all.
You know what Bryce Young just learned for himself? That he knows how to win football games. Yeah, no shit. He won football games at Alabama, against Georgia, against NFL defenses. Those were 11 dudes. Half those dudes went to the league that year, and the next half went the year after.
Yeah, half of them on the Eagles team.
That's what I mean. You think that he don't know how to win football games? Are you serious?
Yep.
He didn't forget how to play football. You have a terrible roster. Your draft picks were atrocious. How on earth did you expect to win football games? You changed the coaching staff, bad draft picks. It is not a one-to-one situation. Put Bryce Young in that Indianapolis Colts situation. It is a much different quarterback.
And I'll say this because you're looking at the Houston Texans, and that's funny because we're going to get into the Houston Texans, right? But C.J. Stroud, right?
Mhm.
No Nico Collins,
Yep.
no Stephon Diggs. We see a different C.J. Stroud, right?
Sure.
Meaning that the situations matter, the support
Course they do.
matters, right? And who they have around them. One thing a young quarterback could use is a running back. And I think this is the year at the end of the day, right? I think everybody's hopping on this train of return of the running backs. I'm sitting here looking at the leading rushers, Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Jordan Mason, Josh Jacobs, and Joe Mixon, right? You know what? Something in common, all of those guys? They're
Agents.
on really good football teams, and they were free agent pickups.
Yep.
They were all pickups, right? Castaways that the previous team said, you know what? We can move on and go get a running back from elsewhere. Those teams, especially the Tennessee Titans and the New York Giants, are the teams that they went to. You could potentially say the Baltimore Ravens are going to represent the AFC in the Super Bowl, and the Philadelphia Eagles are going to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl. Let's talk about that, man. Just the running back and the impact that running backs have had.
It's almost like when you have an identity as a football team,
Yep.
and then you trade away the thing that gives you that identity, it's bad for you.
Mhm.
Because that's exactly what happened. Joe Sheen on Hard Knocks, we talked about this, right? We can't pay our quarterback $40 million and then pay our running back $12 million.
I would have said you're right.
You're
can't
right.
pay your quarterback.
Don't pay that quarterback $40 million. That's the problem.
Yep.
You had 65 to 70% of your total offensive possessions that ended in scoring came from Saquon Barkley. And then you got rid of him. And now you're watching Philadelphia and you're going, oh, that looks pretty familiar. He looked
Yep.
pretty good.
Yep.
And Derrick Henry, uh, the man defies logic. How he runs, the Tennessee Titans without Derrick Henry are terrible, horrible, have nothing to rely on. Will Levis would really like to have Derrick Henry to rely on.
Yep.
Those things matter. And as a girl who grew up in Chicago, running backs matter because when the weather turns cold and all that flash, it happens every year for Miami. Colin Cowherd said it best. Miami is the spray tan of the NFL. Starts off looking great, and then goes away, it's going to fade. And that's what happens when that high-powered offense goes to play in Kansas City.
Right.
You have to be able to play defense and run. The football has not changed. And this entire narrative in the NFL doesn't make any sense because look at every Super Bowl champion ever. They have had a balanced team, a team that, yes, they have a great quarterback, but they also can run the football,
Yep.
which lends itself to opening up the passing attack and playing a good defense and having a good defense. It's not rocket science. I don't know why we pretend like we just get too cute.
Tom Brady ruined football for a lot of people, or what they thought was successful. It was because the focus was on Tom Brady, right?
Yeah.
And that, hey, you need a superstar, one-of-one quarterback. Guess what? That's not going to happen. And for
No.
those NFL teams, you should not be aiming to have the next Tom Brady.
No.
And that's your answer because that's one-of-one, right? And right now, that one-of-one quarterback is Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
So instead of trying to find the next Tom Brady played for, 20 years in the NFL?
Yep.
Who else won Super Bowls in between that? Ben Roethlisberger and the Pittsburgh Steelers has
Yep.
2. Russell Wilson has 1. Eli Manning has 2.
Peyton
Peyton Manning
Manning.
has 2, right? There are guys that won in between those situations, and that's where you should be aiming as a franchise instead of, you know what, we're going to hit the lottery by drafting the best quarterback ever. That is not a good recipe.
No, you're right. You know what it is? It's the swinging for the fences of thinking you can replicate the 6 Super Bowl shit.
That's what I'm trying to.
It's not happening. The thing that we have right now with Mahomes, like everybody, like as much as I know people like to start rooting against teams when they get to this threshold, we are so lucky to have watched that era of Tom Brady, to have grown up and watched him play and do something that is probably never going to happen again.
Yep.
Probably never. And as much as everybody wants to think, yeah, the Chiefs could just keep winning, like, guys, go win another 3. And, oh, by the way, Tom Brady switched directions and went from the AFC to the NFC and then won again, has 7 Super Bowls. Dude, it's insane. Even if Mahomes wins more Super Bowls, it won't take away from what Brady did. And I don't think you can't bank on the 2 outliers in the history of the NFL.
No.
Like, you can't bank on that being your thing. If you do that, you're going to lose.
Yep.
You will lose.
100%. And that's where the running back conversation comes back into play because the running backs provide value. And they're extremely talented people. For how bad the New York Giants have been for the past 5 years, Saquon Barkley was that bright spot. And even Christian McCaffrey. And instead of everybody having a light bulb moment, maybe running backs are valuable. We just say that Christian McCaffrey is the one-off. And that's not true. There's still levels to running backs. Yeah, you can line up anybody in the backfield and they can run the football. But can they do it at a high level? Are they great matchup people? Can they catch the ball out of the backfield? Are they explosive home run threats? Yep. It puts you in a different dynamic as far as running back. And I know because I've sat in those meeting rooms, they change the math, right? They get the defensive coordinators thinking because I have to account for this guy. When I entered this media industry, it was the slight against running backs. I look at everybody now calling Joe Sheen an idiot. Those same people that sat there and said running backs don't matter can't say anything about Joe Sheen because he did exactly what your same ideology was. Yep. And that was devalue the running back, pay the quarterback no matter what, because that's the way it has to go.
Just out of curiosity, best team in football right now, probably the Detroit Lions.
100%.
You remember when they drafted Jahmyr Gibbs?
Yep.
And the internet lost their mind. They said, who takes a running back with that pick? How can you guys do that? Just out of curiosity, how's it looking with Jahmyr Gibbs? Just out of curiosity.
Really good.
How that
really
pick
good.
looking now?
Really good.
You know, because Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell know who they are as a football team, and they draft to their identity. Their identity is a bunch of players who got a chip on their shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
Look at those guys. You got a cast-off quarterback who was doubted after going to a Super Bowl. You got Amon-Ra St. Brown, who can literally name every dude who was drafted in front of him, who's now a top 3 wide receiver. You've got a running back who nobody thought should be picked, who's now becoming a superstar in the NFL. It's almost like they know who they are, and they stick to it.
And you know what they've done? They've taken, because remember that I think it was that same exact draft. They not only took a running back,
They took a
they took
linebacker.
a linebacker who everybody clowned them, right?
Yeah.
But then now everybody's looking around, man, we need a linebacker to be able to stop the run. This is my statement that there are 11 positions on the field. All 11 positions matter. Once you get to the
kidding.
playoffs, this is not the NBA where you get a best out of 7 situation.
No.
You get one time to play a team, and if you don't show up or this team out-schemed you,
You're
that's
out.
a wrap. You're done for that entire year. So you have to look at that situation and say that it's about building the best roster. You can't tell the San Francisco 49ers that Fred Warner doesn't matter, right? I
Thank
want
you.
you to go back and tell the Carolina Panthers that Luke Kuechly didn't matter, right? I want you to go back and tell your Chicago Bears that Brian Urlacher was not the reason why they made it to Super Bowl.
The Chicago Bears have more Hall of Famers than any other professional organization. And there are a lot of linebackers. You think linebackers don't matter? The numbers don't back that up. And what you said, all 11 matter, the positional value stuff, you can throw right out the damn window. You can take your position, because that is exactly what the Lions were getting clowned out for.
Yep.
Well, who is the best damn player on the board, period? That is all that matters. You looked at me and you said, Jahmyr Gibbs is that dude. It looks pretty good now, because guess what? Dan Campbell didn't care about your positional value.
That same draft, they followed it up with Sam Laporta.
Yeah.
So it was like a running back,
A
a
tight end,
linebacker, and a tight end. Oh, these guys don't have any idea what they're doing.
Who's questioning Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell now? Those same people are praising them for the same things that they were shitting on them for when they drafted those 3 guys. All 3 guys starting, playing significant role on the best team in football.
Yep.
Take your positional value scale draft community, and you could throw that thing out the damn window.
I think we're done with the NFL. We're going to shift to college football.
Ooh, yeah.
This year has been unique because I'm going to ask this question. And I think if I ask this question to 5 different people, I'm going to get 5 different answers.
I know where this is headed.
Who's the best team in college football right now?
Yeah, it's a tough question, because this is the most parity we've ever seen in college football. It's like the NFL this year, where there's a lot more opportunity for teams to win. Whereas in the past, it's been Alabama, Georgia. Definitely LSU, can't forget about them. Nebraska in the 90s, shout out Huskers. Notre Dame still gets claim 89. So, on a more serious note, back to who's the best team in college football, because I've filibustered for enough time. I think that you and I were at the game watching the 2 best teams in college football.
Okay.
I think the Oregon Ducks and the Ohio State Buckeyes are probably the 2 best, most balanced teams in football. And what I mean by that is, what did we just talk about? All 11 matter. Both sides of all 3 phases of football. They're the most balanced from top to bottom, from their special teams isn't a total weakness to their offense isn't they're balanced. They can run the football. They can play defense. They've got decent special teams. All of that matters when you're talking about being the best team. And if I'm going one way versus the other, I'm going to the Oregon Ducks. And I'm going to the Oregon Ducks because when push comes to shove, I trust Dylan Gabriel a lot more than I trust Will Howard. And I saw the 1v1 matchup that happened. Dylan takes them all the way down the field. They score. They do what they need to do. Will Howard has a moment where he loses track of how much time is on the clock, and they lose that game. They were in position to win that football game.
Yep, they were.
That is the difference between being the best
Experience.
and being the best and losing that game. And I think those are the 2. If you asked me 3 weeks ago, I probably would have said Texas. And I can't say that at all anymore. And Georgia, what is Carson Beck? I feel for the kid. I want to be very clear. We are not a negative player show. We will never be like that. I genuinely want to know what's going wrong with the kid, because mentally he looks like he's not in a good place. He didn't forget how to play football.
Yeah, 100% when Kirby embraced him.
Yeah.
Because as a head coach and just a position coach, period, it's time to lean into your guy. And then you can look in your player's eyes and sometimes give him a hug.
Yeah,
Don't be
embrace.
right. Yeah, and embrace. I need you to get back up off the mat, big dog. Almost like in boxing. Sometimes you need to tell him, hang in there, keep fighting, keep swinging.
Who's the best team in college football, Keith?
I'm not going to answer this.
Okay.
Because I'm looking at it, right? And I think that every single team, and that's the unique thing about this, is that I think it's a styles make fight situation. Because I agree with you that Oregon beat Ohio State. But when Texas is on, I believe that Texas can beat Oregon. And it's because, Quinn, you're talking about, now they look very similar, right? Because they have both similar wide receivers, right? Quarterbacks are both heavily experienced guys, right? Same statures. They thrive on the same situations. Defenses are solid, right? Have good trenches and good offensive linemen. So I look at that. I would say this, that with Ohio State, I have concerns about them. Because even that matchup against Penn State,
It was not pretty.
it was not pretty. They got away with winning the game, right, at the end of the day.
A tough environment to go into.
So if I had to vote and you know what, Keith, pick one team, I'm probably still going to go with Texas because they also had that big time when they walked into the big house, Michigan, week 3, and they put it on Michigan. And I get it. Michigan's not the same, but Michigan defense is still real. They still have 3 first-rounders on their defense, and the way that offense looked, they were operating at an exceptional level, right?
Yeah.
I want to talk about this, the teams that are outside that top 4, right?
Well, I got one.
Who you got? Who you got?
I got one, and it's one that
For the best team in college football, or are you giving them a shout-out? Or you think they're real contenders?
I don't think I can possibly count them out anymore,
Okay.
and that's the Indiana Hoosiers.
It's
They
not
are-
basketball, Paige. It's not basketball.
Listen, I get it. Trust me, I get it. I have a lot of friends that went to school there. I would love it, but as somebody who went to the University of Nebraska and has a vested interest in the Huskers, I saw the Nebraska Cornhuskers go to Ohio State and take the Buckeyes to the brink.
Mhm.
I mean, to the very last moment. And Indiana put an ass whooping of all ass whoopings on Nebraska. I mean, it was never a game. Not from 5 minutes into it till the very end. And they were 1 week after the other. I saw them and I went, holy cow, Indiana is for real. And I'm not talking just because, I'm talking about because they were down 10 against Michigan State and then they scored 47 unanswered points. They're not winning, they're whooping everybody's ass. There's a difference. Nobody is doing what they're doing. Nobody. They are literally whooping everybody's ass. It's insane. And this coach is arrogant enough and confident enough that I think he's got his guys believing in this.
Yeah.
And it's the year where this kind of stuff can happen because this is like March Madness for football. We've got this new setup with the college football playoff where they might get a home game and all they got to do is stay hot and believe in themselves. It's one and done. You're out.
Yep.
And I think that lends itself to, sure, maybe if they played Texas 10 times, Texas might beat them more. But in a 1v1 matchup, I can't go against these guys. They're just beating everybody. And at a certain point, I got to stop saying, it's Indiana. Because now it's like, shit, it's Indiana. It's different.
I don't know about that.
He an SEC homer, and he's having a tough time because he know Alabama and LSU, I'm telling you, Indiana not afraid.
All right, I'm going to tell you this.
Bring them to Indiana in the cold.
And guess what? I respect it. And I think this is the reason why the 12-team format is needed. Because I think even in the past, even with the 14 format, I doubt Indiana was getting in, right? Like,
That's what I mean.
There was not going to be enough space for the committee to sit there and look at the brand of Indiana and still put them over Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, and insert another team, right?
Because if they win out and then they lose one game,
then it's
to
gonna be
Oregon,
enough
and then they won't get in. Whereas now they will get in.
Yeah,
and they should if that happens.
I'm gonna talk about 2 teams that we've seen a lot over the past since 2014. Alabama and Clemson. This a contender or pretender situation because it's very hard for me to throw them away because let's be honest, the best half of football that was played this year was by Alabama versus Georgia.
Yep.
That was the best half of football. Clemson, I look at Clemson and we are the draft network, we're the draft club, so we pay attention to draft prospects.
Yep.
That team is loaded.
Yeah.
And until that Louisville game, they had that hiccup. So now they have a loss against Louisville, they have a loss against Georgia. But the ACC, can they still make it to the ACC championship? And I think you talk about everything that Clemson has, I think they have the players. They're a team that I think if they get hot down the stretch,
For sure.
they can go match for match, player for player with a lot of teams at the top and could give some people problems.
Yeah, I think if you asked me contender, pretender, that was the question.
Yeah, that was the question.
I think as of right now, Alabama is right in the middle.
Okay.
I'm not wanting to answer the question.
Come on, I answer the question.
No, you don't like answering the question. I feel more confident than Alabama is a contender because I've seen that half of football that was so ridiculous against Georgia that I know what they can be. I know Clemson's been good, but I haven't seen that from them. And so that's why it's hard. I hate calling them a pretender, but I just don't see them as a national champion this year. And this is a year where I feel like anybody could win it. But I do feel like if Alabama puts it all together, they can be a national champion.
Yeah, I think
More
it's
than Clemson.
right, and I think it's which team can win 3, 4 games straight, right? Like, put
Yeah.
3, 4 good
Put a hot
football
streak
games,
together.
yeah, in a row against good opponents, and that's what
Yeah.
the playoffs are gonna do.
I think that's where I play it out. Alabama goes to Baton Rouge and wins that game, gets hot and goes on a streak. That's why I can see them being a
Okay.
contender.
They have something to catapult.
They have something to catapult them into that conversation. Clemson doesn't have anybody. The ACDC, they don't have anybody. They don't have juice left to go do that. And there's just not, it's not, I hate saying this. It's not the same as the SEC.
SEC, yeah, go ahead and say it. You can say it again. Listen, I get it. Best football is still played in the SEC. Always has.
What were those top 3 teams we just talked about? Oh, checks notes.
We-
Oregon, Big Ten. Ohio State, Big Ten. Indiana, Big Ten. Okay.
We've been
Checks
there.
notes.
We've been there before. We've been
Checks
there
notes.
before.
Okay.
But let's wrap this conversation up with this. With Oregon, the number 1 team in the nation. We've seen Oregon here before. And
Yeah.
Oregon not necessarily finish. And I know everybody is new coaches, it's new players, right? You're talking about different eras, right? But
Yeah, for sure.
do you think that fans should be like hold Oregon accountable? Because even Oregon having some of the best wins, people still want to lean Ohio State is the best. And I wonder if it's some of that Oregon type situation. What you do with the Chargers, right?
It's unfair.
Okay,
You want
why
to
you
know
say that?
why
Yeah.
it's unfair? Because they're not in the Pac-12 anymore. They beat Ohio State already.
Yeah.
They went to Michigan and beat the crap out of them.
Mhm.
They have been on the road multiple times in the Big Ten, tough travel schedule, battle tested, won, and they won. I don't think it's fair. I don't think it was fair when they were in the Pac-12, and I definitely don't think it's fair now. Dan Lanning is not a West Coast guy.
Right,
He
right.
came from the SEC,
Yep.
brought that culture, and they are winning in a balanced way. They've got a very good football team, and they have been more battle tested than anybody else, and they've won. I don't know how you can't. Something we don't like at the Draft Network, and I don't like when it happens, is when people project a prior prospect onto a current prospect.
Yeah, 100%.
I don't like somebody saying, because this was like, this is not the Mariota team. Not the same players, not the same coaches, not the same era, not the same conference. Literally, there ain't a damn thing that's similar. Not one. It's a totally different ball game. So as much as it's sure the same logo, that's about it. That's where it ends. That's where it ends.
That's where it ends right there. The Draft Club episode. Y'all remember Draft Club, players only.